Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jenny White.
Wow, the whole name today?
Always.
Like,
I always say Jenny White.
Do you?
Yeah. I always say Jenny White.
In case I'm confused with somebody else?
No, because just in case you get a new viewer, somebody comes in
one
way or another, they just, hey, who is this? Who is this fireball that's up there on the screen? I want to know who that is.
Should I start calling you Michael Grande? Good morning, Michael Grande.
No, I'm trying to limit my exposure to the internet.
You are?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're on this morning on a podcast with a shirt that says arrest Fauci, and you're trying
arrest Fauci and Gates.
There we go.
You know how many people stop me when I wear this shirt out in public? I mean, literally everybody's like, God, I hope that happens. Man, that's the best shirt I've ever. Oh yeah. It is hilarious. Lauren, she won't even go with me to the store if I have this shirt on. She's so embarrassed.
Lauren won't go to the store with you anyway because you're just an embarrassment in general.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a mean one. You're not an embarrassment in general, really.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to take a second since Julianne's coming on here today also and edify you guys a little bit, because literally the world is a better place because Jenny White and Julianne Romanello are both in it. I'm just saying it's a better place because you guys are on top of it all the time.
Man, that was like the best Valentine I got.
Well, I mean, but think about how much stuff. I mean, really, think about how much stuff we learn, from you, from Julianne, from everybody else. I mean, I'm so glad that we have somewhat of an outlet to do this.
Me too. And I love you guys. Y'all are the best. You all are the best. You watch. So there. We wouldn't even have a podcast without you people, without Steph and Dorn and Julia. We wouldn't even have a podcast.
Yeah, but in reality, I mean, it's so hard to get people, because look, for years, I mean, you've always gone down the Capitol and you've, protested, and tried to change things in one way or another, but that's funny. But,
I love George.
And you look at all the stuff you published, look at the entire history of all the stuff you published and done. But in today's time, you have to have this video aspect, that's just how it is. And I'm so glad that you've transitioned into this because it's needed, because like we've said, no one else is telling people this kind of stuff in Oklahoma. And I'm so glad for President Trump and Cash and RFK and all these guys. Yeah, they're gonna nail put the nails in the coffin at the federal level, I hope. But still, our executives aren't doing anything. Think about it. What are our executives in this state doing along those lines to protect our liberties, to give us our freedoms, to allow goodness and moral values, and it's all just BS. So we have to be able to do that in our own state.
Okay, so speaking of that, let me share this is my article today in the Federalist. Your farm fresh produce might be fertilized with forever chemicals and human waste.
Wow.
So it's really sad. It's sad. So the lady who's my editor, like my secondary editor at the Federalist, we were going back and forth over what was in the article. And she was talking about the fact that in the UK, she's from the UK, and in the UK, her uncle uses human crap on their produce there. And she said her uncle and somebody else were like laughing about it because they gave this tomato to somebody and they were like, this is the best. And he goes, it was grown in crap. Oh my God.
Well, I mean,
what is the matter with people?
I mean, I guess it could be okay if it's, if it's completely clean, organic, there's no chemicals in it. I mean, if that's how it's supposed to be, but that's not. I mean, I don't know. It's so crazy.
My dad, it's weird, but my dad, so he was in the Navy. And then right after World War II, he went into the reserves, the Naval Reserves. But they still sent him over to Japan after the war was over as a reservist. And he was there for some time. And he told me one time, this was like a long time ago, before this even became an issue. And he told me a long time ago, he was like, oh, yeah, have you heard of something called night soil? And I was like, no, Pop, what's that about? And he goes, the Japanese use human poop to fertilize food, and they call it night soil.
Wow.
So, but Harold makes a really great point, how much waste is filled with pharmaceuticals and drugs. And that's, I think, one of the
real issue.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Well, not even the biggest thing. All of it's the biggest thing. But anyway, guys, go to the Federalist and find this article and share, because as our friend Sandra Treywick will tell you, we're getting bupkis at the Capitol right now. So Jim Shaw and Shane Jett, who are trying to stop this, are getting blocked. Their best bill hasn't been heard in committee, and
uh-oh. Is Jenny frozen? I don't know if she's frozen. I better text her. Is that me or Jenny?
Not sure what happened there.
Oh, I think you're freezing a little bit again,
Michael.
Yeah, I'm here. Are you there? All right, you're back. You're back.
Oh my word! I start talking about crap and they cut me off.
Yeah, is your VPN on or something?
Yeah, but if I turn it off now, it'll get used to it. If I turn it off now, it'll throw everything off. I think it's probably got something to do with the cold weather.
Cold weather.
Hey, yeah, because
electronics should run better in the cold weather.
Wow,
Jenny.
That's a fair cop. So I don't know. Maybe they are cutting me off, because it doesn't look like, if it doesn't get any better and it acts wackadoo again, then I'll cut off my VPN and I'll go out for a while. But Steph's right. We're going to have to go there in a very large group and just and like I said, we talked about this before in a podcast. It'd be nice to bring some to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Like maybe in some little baggies and put it on people's desks.
Well, yeah, we said that a couple shows ago. We just need to get some of that human manure that they're spraying out there in the fields, and we'll just dump it. Just open a bag and put it in the trash cans all over the place. That way, you're not legally like like destroying property or, doing something on, or you're just throwing it away. You're just throwing it away. So there's no way they could bring charges against you in any way.
And Julia says, let's bring them a big poop fruit basket. We can bring them some produce that was grown in this stuff and then just say, here's your produce. It was grown in this. All right. I think Julianne's got our camera working and we've done the poop thing to death here. So Gracie says, spread it on the lawn. We really should do that. Although remember, Shane told us not to because we get in trouble. So he's already told us not to.
Yeah.
Poop baskets. That's right. Poop baskets. All right. I'm going to pull this out of here and turn this off. Now we've got this. We're ready to bring Julianne on this morning. Good morning, Julianne.
There she is.
Good morning. How are you?
We are talking about poop.
It's that kind of a morning, I think.
It's and Harold says, by the way, I love the arrest Fauci shirt. Yes, it's a poop filled morning
Gates,
because
Gates. Don't forget Bill Gates. He needs
that's
to go
right.
down too.
But don't forget though, Gates and Julianne will back me up on this now. Gates is a good guy now.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. I mean, he's like, going to Trump stuff, and he's like a good girl now, a good girl, good boy now. Have you noticed?
Right there with Elon.
Yeah. Yes. However, dadgummit, Julianne, I'm being, I how cynical I am. And I'm being cynical, but boy, it sure looks like he's just kicking some butt and taking some names.
Yeah.
No, she's just trying to not scream at me and go, you're a big dummy. Pull your head. Pull your head out of your backside. But Julianne, I have to have hope. I have to have hope. Let me have a little
we
hope.
All do.
And I mean, if it all goes wrong, then I will, I'll say, well, I dared to hope. And
well, hope is an impact metric right now.
Hope is a what?
It's profitable. It's an impact metric right now.
How so? I thought that was under Barack. When you
think of like Barack Obama's his tagline. And Jenny, I'm sorry, you're kind of cutting out. I don't know. I can see Michael just fine. I think. Yeah, he's.
I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna get out and get back in.
So if I look at you a little strangely.
Yeah, she's gonna redo.
So it's just you and me, Michael. Let's talk about her.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, she's got her VPN on, and it messes up her deal. So she'll have to come back in. Well, anyway, did you were you on, Julianne? Did you hear me when I was saying thank God for you and Jenny?
Yes, that was so nice. So I would have acknowledged it more, but I was struggling with my cables and I thought I had it all worked out. And then I was like,
Well, I just think it's so important because literally there's no one else.
And she's back.
There she is. There's no one else that does the kind of work you do, especially. I mean, Jenny has all of this political stuff. She's so on top of all the legislative stuff, but you are so on top of the whole social side of the social engineering side of all that stuff. I'm just so thankful.
Well, she's got the 30,000 foot view. I think sometimes we get, like, particularly me, we're super mired in the minutia of HB 1465. You need to stop, and it's we're not.
That's so important. I mean, I think we need both, right? And I will always give credit to Jenny for she was writing about impact investing way back. Yeah. And that understanding how impact investing worked, through the work of a lady, Allison McDowell, who writes Wrench in the Gears, and Linda Murphy had talked about it a little bit, and a gal named Emily, who I can't remember the name of her blog, but she was she's in Maine and she writes on education. And Jenny, you know, when I learned about that aspect of the new economy, then it made sense of all of this garbage. It makes sense of the social engineering, you know. So if you want to know why, say, DEI was so important for so long, it's because of these impact metrics and looking at things like, oh, well, how can we measure and manage and monetize, you know, different attitudes, different behaviors, hope. If you want to know why SEL was so important in schools,
Yeah.
it was because there's a profit potential attached to these, you know, human behavioral outcomes. And so Jenny was writing about it a long time ago. And I think, wow, you know, she was way ahead of her time. And I think from that, I was able to, you know, shoot up to the 30,000 foot view.
So
But
this was
then
this was all the way back
we've got
in 20,
people.
2018. And I
This is
actually
it.
sent,
Yep.
yeah, I sent it to the Federalist, and she didn't, I think they didn't quite get it yet. And to be
Yeah.
completely honest, it was like after I wrote this article, I kind of got, oh, here's what it says. According to the article, but with social impact bonds, sometimes referred to as pay for success financing models, investors aren't actually guaranteed that profit. They only get it if the programs they invest in succeed, and success is a metric that's carefully negotiated. The higher the success rate, the more investors make. In Granite's case, the district, the United Way, the investors, and an evaluator at Utah State University agreed success would be measured by the number of at-risk preschoolers who avoided special education once they hit elementary school. Today in Utah, and this is back in 2018, those special education services cost around $3,000 per student per year. According to the terms of the agreement, investors were to be paid back using a portion of those annual special ed savings. The remaining savings are left on the table. Ideally, they'll be pumped back into more preschool for more kids. So I said, what could be the problem here? Nobody gets taxed to fund the problem, right? Consequently, who could be upset? For 30,000 foot level, this sounds something like high level crowdfunding. And then I talked about the fact that it's not, that it's, the taxpayers are completely left out. So if the taxpayers are completely left out, then who's funding our pre-K?
Right. And it's the philanthropists, it is the stakeholder councils, it's the task force. And you know what you talked about in that article, and this was before I even knew that we were in deep trouble as a country. I was still what blue pilled, I guess. You know, I just was in my
oh my
own
gosh,
world,
Julie,
and I didn't know
you
anything about the New World Order. What? Yeah.
I said, are you saying
I
you
had
had
no
hope?
clue. I had hope back then. But you mentioned, you know, these programs are justified in terms of future cost offsets, right? So it's something that we've talked about on this show any number of times. It is all fake, you know. I mean, how can you say, oh, well, we have definitely saved this much money, you know? And so this program is delivering on its terms of success, and it is benefiting the taxpayer because it saves so much money. You know, oh, we have avoided the cost of special ed for these kids.
Yeah.
You don't know that.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so they pick any number of metrics that they want, and they can, you know, manipulate the statistics any way that they would like with their fancy graphics, you know, and the big bold typeface that is designed to grab your attention, and you know, it's lies, damn lies, and statistics, right?
Yeah.
And so they just make, this is okay, I don't want to offend anyone, but on Facebook, I've like used a little hashtag that I think sums up the basis of the new economy, and it is just make shit up. And that's what they do. Just make shit up.
Yeah. Well, and think about this, Julianne. As
So see, it was good to start talking about human manure and poop
poop.
today, right? Because that's what it all is.
Yeah.
So we've got to be smart and strong and go way up to the 30,000 foot level, but then also get back here and look at those House bills and what our legislators are doing so that we can stop them from getting away with just making shit up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Forgive the crass statement.
And what I want to say on to dovetail on that from the financial side, as they make things up to look a certain way, the real economy is not as good as what they say or whatever, whatever the connection is. And as that counterpart, let's say the real economy is not near as good as what they say it is. Now it's another excuse to dump more money into that in order to have make more profit. And, and it's a whole cycle. It's a whole cycle of deception.
Well,
exactly.
We talked, we did a whole show, remember, on nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about that. And, I find it interesting with all the USAID information coming out, how badly nonprofits have been the downfall of the United States. I mean, all this money infuses into these programs, and these liberals, these progressive, these whatever you want to call them, use it to undermine so much of what the United States has stood for, what we, our principles and, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it makes sense. But what I want to talk to you about, though, we were very concerned during the Common Core era about this whole notion of using a national curriculum to educate kids. And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that homogeneity doesn't fit any. I mean, if you use the shotgun approach to anything, specifically education, you're going to hit a couple of kids, but the rest of them, it's going to be the bell-shaped curve. What is it that we're doing right now, letting the Chamber of Commerce kind of push us into the educational model that we have? Why do people, you tell them, well, we're just educating kids for jobs. And they're like, well, I want my kid to have a job. Tell us why this is just the worst model ever.
Well, I mean, just look who the Chamber of Commerce is entangled with. It's entangled with the UN, what is it? CED, Committee for Economic Development. What is it?
Yeah.
I can't remember. I can remember the acronym, but not what it stands for. But the Chamber of Commerce, it's entangled deeply with the UN agenda. It's all over their website at the federal level. And so the national, National Chamber of Commerce, it issues marching orders to all the local branches. Yeah. And they all say the same thing. So if you look at Tulsa's Chamber of Commerce, if you look at Oklahoma City's Chamber of Commerce, if you look at Salt Lake City's Chamber of Commerce, or Dallas or any other city, they receive their marching orders from the national branch, which is absolutely 100% entangled with the UN and the Sustainable Development Agenda, right? And what kind of jobs are envisioned under that Sustainable Development Agenda? They're jobs that are going to promote a certain set of attitudes, a certain type of behavior, and let's say they're going to try to craft a certain person who can live in and still be profitable within this fourth industrial revolution paradigm of, a completely measured, managed, and monetized society. So if you look at, where are we headed in terms of the overall economic outlook and the future of work, that's a phrase that they use a lot. We're looking at an era in which massive automation is coming. We're not going to have knowledge workers so much as we're going to have algorithms and programs. And people forget this. People think of, who's going to be hurt by automation, and they think of, some of the blue collar jobs and less skilled labor. Oh, yeah, those jobs are going to become redundant through automation. Well, yes, they are to a certain extent. I mean, it's going to take a toll, but what's really going to knock the wind out of people is what automation and and the technological side of it, like the programming side, the application side, what that's going to do to so-called knowledge workers. And this is the middle class. These are the people who work in the offices, who do things like business development, who do HR, who do strategy for any number of companies. These are service workers and people who have the desk job. Well, those people who have been the solid middle class that has been a sort of bulwark against a bifurcated society where there's just the haves and the have-nots. Those people, the knowledge workers, they are going to become totally redundant, right? Like they're going to be, you're going to find corporations that are just getting rid of those people right and left. If you can work from home, if you can work remotely, then you're probably going to be redundant in the next decade. Yeah. And by redundant, that means you're not going to be needed because there's going to be a computer program that's going to do your job for you. Especially if for the past several years, you've been sitting in front of a Zoom screen training the robot or the algorithm in, how you as a human being and a particular human being would approach some tasks associated with your work. You've been training your replacement this whole time. So, so the chambers of commerce, they know this. They know that we're moving toward this kind of economy that is going to see massive amounts of unemployment. And if you look through all the white papers, you're going to constantly see the phrase reskilling, upskilling. I think that there's a nonprofit. I was just looking it up last night here in Oklahoma. It's called like upskillok.org. And, so all of these white papers talk about the need to upskill or reskill or retool the workforce. And some of that applies to those people who have blue collar jobs or manual labor jobs, but a lot of it applies to these middle class knowledge workers who are going to have to be manipulated over and over again in order to deliver a profit to these human capital impact investors, which are the ones that really benefit from this new sustainable development driven economy. Because, and I know I've gone on a lot of, I've touched on a lot of points here, so let me try to rein it in. What is sustainable development? Well, we hear that it is the effort to base an economy on resources that are not scarce. So if we have an economy that is based on scarce resources, our progressives say, well, at some point we're going to use up all the trees in the forest. Okay. We're going to dirty all the water. And so these business models are unsustainable. Climate risk is business risk. So we have to base our economy on something that is not a scarce resource. So let's ask ourselves, what is there that can be the basis for profit making that's never going to run out? What is that? Well, it is the business of changing human beings over and over and over again. So, this is why I said impact investing. When I understood what that is, it made sense of everything, because impact investing gives a profit to investors who have changed the status quo in some way. You've taken a poor, at-risk kid and you have made them better so that taxpayers are not going to have to pay for,
be burdened by them
later on, right? And so the investors are going to make a return off of that initial outlay of funds, that were invested in early childhood education to prevent future harms, right? It's all about changing behavior. And so you see a class of investors that are developing right now that are saying, well, we want to invest in these outcomes. So outcome-based education, Common Core, it's all about delivering certain goals. And maybe in the last administration, we might say, those had to do with DEI goals. Oh, we have diversity, equity, inclusion goals. Right. And that makes people better. And it's good for our community, so on, so on, so on. Really, it has nothing to do with a specific character of DEI. It has nothing to do with the effort to make the community better. It's all about creating an economic model that's based on changing human beings. So right as we're seeing DEI go out the window and we think, oh, we have like moved on from sustainable development. It's done. Thank you, Mr. Trump. You got to take a step back and say, oh no, wait, the economic model of sustainable development is based on the business of changing people. So you can make them appear more progressive and friendly, or you can make them appear more patriotic and conservative Christian and, pro-Trump. It doesn't matter. You can change people to the left, you can change people to the right, but that is what sustainable development is about. It's about economic development tied to the sustainable process of manipulating human beings over and over again. And our chambers of commerce totally understand that that's where the new economy is going. So, you're going to have automation that's going to make people useless eaters. They're not going, right. Their actual labor is not going to contribute because they're going to be more, they're going to be clunkier than robots and programs. So
more human.
Well, and the cost.
Yeah.
Think of all the costs that come along with it. Your payroll, all your medical, your pension, all your other benefits. I mean, all those things are that's the bottom line of every one of these corporations.
Yeah, people are expensive.
Exactly. People are expensive and they're messy. They're complicated. Yeah. Robots, programs, they're not. Yeah. You just program the system and then it works perfectly. So what are you going to do with all these people? And where are you going to make profits? Because capitalism works on moving money. So you have to have a way to move money here and there. And what is that way? It's through human development, human capital development. Make them more progressive, make them more conservative. And you do that through the education system it's a globalist system that focuses on what? Adaptability and resilience. Because
that's how they sold Common Core. Remember, exactly, I mean, those were all the buzzwords that they used to sell Common Core. We need kids to develop resiliency. We need to, all of those things were buzzwords for that particular thing.
Yeah, resilience. Why? Because you want to manipulate them one way and you don't want to break them because you want to manipulate them in another way afterward. You want them to be able to withstand all of these different social engineering programs over and over and over again, so that the impact investors who are pumping money into creating positive social outcomes, they can continue to move their capital around and reap the rewards that are attached to it. And who controls it? Who has oversight? It is not the people. It is an ugly partnership between government and corporations, globalist corporations. So why is the new educational system bad? Why is workforce development bad? Because it's not actually about training you for some job.
Well, you need resilience to solve a simple math problem using
Exactly.
High 10 for that one, Lisa.
It's a mess, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a mess.
But I always said, and Julie and I and Lynn, we always said that it had to be a mess because confused kids are easily led. I mean, confused people are easily led, but confused kids are even more easily led. And anytime you can Sandy says you're killing me, Smalls, because she's, Dr. Harold, the math whiz. That's Sandy Harrell. So she got a real kick out of that. This is what makes homeschooling so unique to the public school system. Homeschoolers are natural entrepreneurs, not trained to be corporate wage slaves. And I think I honestly think, because I get so depressed talking about, feeling like I'm under the government thumb. I like to have a door. I like to have an exit strategy, an exit door, so that we can find a way out. And I think Robert's 100% right, because I think kids out of the system are less likely. I'm not going to say not at all, because I have homeschool kids and I wouldn't say often, but sometimes I'm freaked out about the things that they say. And I think that you didn't get that here. I know you didn't get that here. Where'd that come from? And the problem that we have is the internet. So, but I still think, and hopefully Robert and Lisa and everybody who homeschools will agree that still in all, the foundation is the best. I mean, you provide that good foundation, and they may go off the reservation in a couple of areas, but the foundation will always last. And I look at myself as probably the biggest example of that, because I had parents who were extremely well educated. My mother was an absolute, everybody's heard me talk about how much I love my mom. She was wonderful. And they gave me a really strong upbringing. And I went way off the reservation, way off. But, that I think that everything they ingrained in me came back. I mean, it was there. You couldn't get rid of it. So, I had to come back to it later on, and that's what happened. So I do think that even that getting some good home training into kids can help maybe overcome that. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know, Jenny. I don't know if in today's time, because these kids, like you said it a minute ago, you don't want to feel under the thumb of the government. But these kids, we all come from a different generation than, and especially in schooling, of what is now. And you see these kids, they're just like trained dependents. Yeah. They're completely disempowered in school. Yeah. There's no empowerment unless it's, given from the family. Like, I mean, I think you were kind of going down that aspect of the foundation in your family should help empower you. But like, I just see it even with my own kids, just the thought process, they have no problem with just always taking orders, because that's all they do at school all day long is they just do whatever, the teachers say. There's no empowerment side to all that education. really taking more responsibility, you becoming, a vital person to, to the rest of the world. I mean, it's all literal, just creating dependency in my opinion, because I just see it. And I challenge my own kids all the time. I'm like, why would that be your first thought? If something happens or, whatever, they're always depending on me to do something or someone else to do, it's just, it's mind blowing, but it comes from being, that's just how they're trained in school, just total dependent disempowerment.
Well, and I don't know, maybe Diane's right, because it may be the personality of the kid, because I know Diane and I, we're all, all of us who are on here are kind of similar personalities. We're kind of the, hey, up yours, I'll take care of it myself kind of people. That's, I think, why we gravitate together, is because that's just kind of our makeup. But I do worry, because like Sandy says, teachers think compliance is the goal rather than thinking. And I know that even I was trained into that for a little while I was a teacher. It took me a while to get out of that mold and you start using the Socratic method. Well, then why is it that way?
Yeah.
Okay, but it's that way.
Well, I want to make just a real quick comment, because this will go back to Julianne. I mean, we're talking about teachers, yes, but the entire system that they're under is that globalist compliance system, from even like the UN side all the way down to our little local elementary school.
Well, and apparently Lisa says some schools are going too far and people are actually asking her how to homeschool, because I know I've had people doing that. But back to the whole topic. So, because we get off, but this is good. I'm happy with this. So one of the things that I want to make crystal clear, because I don't think people understand this, I just really don't, because again, it's the whole, well, I want my kid to have a job kind of a thing, Back in the day, because Michael's already called me old without calling me old twice now, I think.
Your generation.
See, your generation calling me old without calling me old. Back in my day, Sonny, we really literally, if I look back, we had OJT, we had on the job training. There were companies that came up and you would literally, because I know I looked for a job, in the early 80s, I was out looking for a job. It would literally say, the job would state what it was, and they would say, we'll train, right? We'll train. What's happened is the training has moved to the government, so that taxpayers are providing on the job training or training for. All you have to do is you have to go to any of the articles that I've written recently about tax credits and how much money our state is giving companies like Paycom, who just had the best year ever, but we've paid them millions and millions and millions of dollars in quality jobs programs, training. We, the state, are training people for these jobs. The problem is you can't train a kid to learn, and you can't just stuff facts into a kid. You have to make a kid think in order to learn. And the best way to describe it is this, still in med school, I think it's learn one, teach one, do one, right? So in the beginning, you have a doctor who's saying, okay, watch me do this. I'm putting the stitches in here, right? Then the next thing you do is you teach that procedure to somebody else. Because when you have to teach somebody else something, you're teaching yourself. So it's like a dual purpose, and it's imprinting it even better on your brain. Then you can do one yourself because you've learned it and you've taught it to somebody. That's the way learning works, but we don't do that. We have kids sitting in front of a computer all day, assaulted by whatever it is that's coming in here, and it's not getting to here. It just goes in here and out here. you
Mm-hmm.
know, because
Yeah.
we're not asking people.
Well,
Um,
those screens are doing the thinking for you. They're just providing all of the data to you. You don't even have to think anymore. You don't have to learn. You don't have to spell. You don't have to recognize words. You don't have to do any of that. But I did want to make before you keep going, Jenny. I did want to make another comment back from the past to now. You can't all. You have to also remember the government is providing a mass amount of jobs now compared to 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, a mass amount. And then on top of that mass amount of just government jobs, you have the corporate, the private public partnerships that's even more entailed in that government side. So there's no critical thinking, entrepreneurship, all that stuff. And even the entrepreneurs of today, all these tech companies, all this tech revolution, this is all fostered in one way or another by the government, by the CIA with their programs like InQtel and these investment firms that get a hold of these companies in the very beginning. They seek out all these entrepreneurs, they buy them, and then they control the technology for the government's benefit. Also, I mean, there's so many avenues of that government control. It's mind numbing.
Yeah, exactly. And, and we have to include the nonprofit sector in there too, because it's basically another branch of the government. And, if you look at, well, it was Norm Dodd's interview, I think, Jenny, that we used when we were talking about philanthropy, where he talks about the influence of the Carnegie Foundation and how, the Carnegie Foundation issued a report that said, we have to basically control the State Department. And you saw how the people were so, and I just use that term generally for, people who were in government, like government officials who trusted the intentions of a nonprofit institute, and then constituents who are not vigilant and looking at what the government is doing when it partners with the nonprofit institute. You see that status, the nonprofit status, encourages people to trust in the activities that are going on. So they're not looking at, okay, what is the Carnegie Foundation really advocating for when it says, well, we need to promote a society of peace. They're not reading the documents. They're not pressing the issue. They're not asking the questions that indicate that there's real learning and critical thinking going on. So, our education system, it's partly to blame. But at that time, what was that, back in the 50s, or was it a little bit sooner than that? I think it might have been a little earlier.
Don't ask me about dates. I don't even know when my kids were born. They all make fun of me about that.
Neither do I. I can't remember the years because it's anyone who asks, I say, when were you born? And people look at me like I'm a bad mom.
Or like you just picked them up off the street.
Yeah. Are they really yours? Yes. The fact that I can't remember their birthday, that's proof.
I think it was the 50s. I think that's,
or maybe it was a little bit earlier. I think that this started going on. It was I think it was after the Great Depression. Well, the whole progressive movement really got in full-fledged at the end of the 1800s. And then, 1909 is that.
By 1920, we were done for.
We were done, but so I brought that up because I was thinking, people weren't asking questions then. And was that the fault of the education system? Well, I mean, things had already started to go awry, but maybe they weren't so bad as they are now. So what else could have contributed to the lack of critical oversight when we saw these mergers between nonprofits and governments, and then the corporations were also in there too. And perhaps it was just a very distracted society. you know? So there's the educational system that is to blame, certainly, for the inability to think. But there's also just the mass distraction that comes with a totally materialistic consumerist society. Like, we are pulled in every which way, um, because we always want more. We want more. We've got these restless urges. And
yeah, but we're trained that way. And Stephanie, that's why I threw that up, because it's so important. We forget that it was the industrial age that, I'm going to say, ruined. I mean, y'all can argue with me, but I would say ruined American society, because we didn't, the industrialists took over, Carnegie, Rockefeller, all of
yeah,
these people who are the
yeah,
ones
that's a
who
great
created
connection. Yeah.
foundations that ruined the country
through the banking system, no
through
less,
the
Jenny. Through
no
the
yeah
banking system on purpose.
Morgan, what's his name? Morgan. I can never remember. Golly, learning about that guy was
John Pierpoint.
Yeah. That it just creeps you out when you learn about these people. I was going to go off on another tangent, but I'll try to stick this one out. It was when you had the industrial era, you had people like John Dewey and the other guy that I never remember his name, who's considered the father of public education. You had them saying, we have to have all of these kids in one school room because these parents are going to work in the city, right? Because they've got these jobs, because now they're getting to do better. They're doing better. And I really do, JP Morgan, both Stephanie and Julia at the same time. JP Morgan, that's exactly correct. Exactly. People always wanted more materialism. I had a homeschool student write a thesis on the very idea that the Industrial Revolution was the start of the downfall. Yet, John Dewey, boo. Yes, Mavis, that is exactly correct. Oh, and Janet, Horace Mann, thank you. Yeah. I love our audience. They're so smart. Seriously, I love this part about our whole podcast, because, some people who do podcasts just let the comments go and they don't ever bring them in. I think the best thing about our podcast are our comments and the people who watch, because they bring so much to this show. And I don't know. I just love them. I think it's so great.
Well, and in that point, Jenny, think about, they had to, those major industrialists, the Rockefellers, all those people, the Astors, they had to create a workforce that could produce for them. That's the whole point of all of it. They had to create the automaton workforce that could do just what they wanted them to do, and that's it, nothing else. They didn't want them to rise any higher, because remember, Rockefeller Senior, competition is a sin. They did not want anyone else in competition with them in any way.
Right. And that there you get to the issue of monopolies and consolidation. And that's what they do. That's what they did in the industries that they were in. And that is what they're doing with education. So, so it's funny. I mean, I think we were going to maybe talk about the parental choice tax credit, which has now been in place for a little over a year now. I mean, I think if you were going to apply for it, it's the season is open now. They talk about it in terms of giving choice, right? And leaving aside all of the just make shit up
Let's say
about this being a tax credit, because as you proved, Jenny, it's not a tax credit. It's a voucher program. It is a subsidy program. It's not a tax credit. So leaving aside all of those issues, the title of it is, I mean, well, now that I think about it, see, it's a lie because it's not a tax credit, but it's a lie also because it says parental choice. There's actually no choice, because what the thing does is it sets up the homogenization of private schooling and also homeschooling, because, the homeschoolers can take the credit too. And it looks like you're getting an alternative to the public schools, and you can pick some a private school that you have vetted and is going to deliver, a more robust educational experience. It looks like that now. Or you can choose to homeschool and you can have the control over your kids' education. But lurking in the background a few years out, let's say, because these people are long-term planners. They have this stuff set out for decades, for centuries, whereas we think in like the next, I don't even know what's happening this afternoon, actually. But in the background, what do they have? Parental choice is not a choice. You're just going to go to you're going to have the illusion of choice. You're going to get to pick between this corporate government training agency and this one. And it's the only difference is going to be the name, right? So they're saying you have choice, but behind all of it is the workforce development agenda. And you look at the state's website, if you look at the parental choice tax credit website, it talks about workforce development. This is a state priority. We are working with business and industry in order to train the workforce of the future. That is not education, especially when you think of the fourth industrial revolution and what the future of work is going to look like. People hear workforce development and they think, oh, I want my kid to learn how to be an excellent plumber because plumbing is always going to be in demand and, he'll have a steady job or whatever. That is what most people think when they see that phrase. But workforce development, future of work is actually about transitioning to an economy in which human capital is important to investors. And the future of work is for you just to type in buttons or plug yourself in to some personalized learning program that's going to upskill you for the next thing over and over and over and over again. And upskilling is not just, oh, I'm learning how to do something. Upskilling is learning how to be something, be more resilient, be more empathetic, be more hopeful, be more trusting. Because why? The economy depends on trust. So you see, like, I'm so glad that you mentioned that the role of industrial activity and like the industrialists in shaping our society, because when we go to the fourth industrial revolution, they are using the same sorts of tactics as were introduced way back, and there are lies involved in all of it, and there's control involved in all of it.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to mention, because we've had a couple of really great comments that I
So go with your big bag.
So Gracie said coding and billing, eventually even doctors with telehealth, that will all be AI diagnosing you.
Well, let me comment on that real quick, because I was going to bring that up after Julianne got off. We're an accredited investor office here, which means we have access to certain investments that the general public doesn't have.
Exactly.
And I will tell you, we have seen private equity venture capital investments into telehealth that literally the AI that's doing the diagnosing at the basic general doctor level, just to take in symptoms, prescribe medication, the AI is like 98% correct, where the physical doctor is only like 70. I mean, so we're already getting to that point. I mean, we saw that investment 2 years ago. I mean, so that all those white collar jobs, all your basic doctors, lawyers, accountants, I mean, all that stuff is going to be up. But I want to just make a comment on that and let you know that we've already seen those things. These major investment companies raising money for that purpose right there.
Well, I spoke to a girl this morning who she's actually neighbor, and a very long story, but She was telling me a horrible story about her mom went in just for a quick 20-minute surgery. They nicked an artery. She ended up having 5 hours worth of surgery. She was her brain was deprived of oxygen for all these, and she was just telling me about how these doctors kept screwing up what happened to her mom. And people have heard my story about what happened to my mom. And I sort of wonder if they're literally, if the med schools are literally working on de-educating these doctors so that they can literally say, hey, AI has to do this because these people suck. You're just not going to get any good doctors because, and I sort of wonder about that because it's, I know there are good doctors out there, just like they're good everybody's out there. I get that. But so many people will tell you that after COVID, the whole medical system kind of just went into the toilet. And it's not because it wasn't going there already. It was. We just noticed it because we found out how authoritarian doctors are, how little they really know about things, how absolutely brainwashed they are by the American Medical Association and American Pediatric Association and all of these associations. And we just kind of found that out. And it makes me wonder if that is, in fact, another one of their whole plans is to make that work. So, we have to have that.
I think you're exactly right on that, Jenny. And
well, dang it.
You're not going to find a white paper that says, let's dumb people down. Let's just not train the doctors so that the robots can take over. You're never
Right.
going to find that. But when you start looking at how from the top these ideas trickle down, and they're bad ideas, yet they're adopted across the board. If you look at education schools, and I taught in the education department at TU as an adjunct for a little bit, and I was able to see how that department, there's a lot that I talk about that happened at TU, but I haven't talked about this so much publicly. But they were going through an accreditation process, and there was someone hired to help with that process. Well, that person totally bungled the whole thing, and the faculty were sort of wondering, why was this person brought in at all? They thought that she was brought in to help with the added load that would come from going through accreditation. But she messed everything up. And I think when I look at it, I was like, oh, she was actually brought in strategically to mess it up. And what happened was that a bunch of scrappy faculty who were sort of old, they were old school, they saved the thing in a sort of miraculous way. And I think the powers that be that controlled the university administration, they were not banking on that. They were thinking that their person could just screw everything up. But the faculty saved it because they genuinely cared about what they were doing. And you know how this goes. But I think if you look at that kind of action, where you have administrators coming and placing a person who's been selected for their incompetence in an important role, that's what's happening in the medical schools. That's what is happening in the law schools. It's happening in every sector of our lives. And I do think that it's a diabolical plan that has been hatched in the minds of sadistic people like JP Morgan, like the Rockefellers, like the Rothschilds, like
the Rothschilds.
Yeah, like all of these people who really, they don't care about the mass of people. They have a delusion about a perfectly functioning automated utopia. And why am I blanking on his name? But Jenny, you brought up the letter that was read into Congress about the
Oh
HR.
yeah. Mark.
Mark, what's his last name?
I don't know why can't
Why am I
Hillary
blanking on
Clinton's Tucker. Mark
Mark
Tucker.
Tucker, right? Where he has this vision of
Yeah.
we're gonna fix everyone in the slot that they can best fit. And if we have a slot, we're gonna craft people that fit it, even if that means destroying the individual. But the system is more important. And the system serves these giant industrialists who, quite frankly, I think made deals with the devil.
You
Let me
know,
just say that.
it's interesting that we got on that tactic, because I was just thinking as I was listening to you talk. So think about the big industrialists and think about the industrial era in the 1920s and 30s, and think about this. So if you came up with a process like Ford, for example, who, came up with the simple engine and then created the first vehicle, you must honestly think that you're some kind of a god, right? I mean, you're
Oh
like,
yeah.
wow, look what I did. Then look at all of these people who are doing this. I really honestly believe that these people, because so many of the things that they did
Mm-hmm.
created such an explosion in American in the American economy, so that everybody had more than they had before, right? It's like we went from an outhouse to indoor plumbing, and everybody was like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Well, the wealth creation was off the scale, and a
right,
rising tide, lifts all boats. But at
right.
some point, yes, there is a major disconnect. But I mean, think of the wealth those guys had with what the value of the dollar was then. I mean, they had hundreds of millions of
Right.
dollars back then. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And I think it was because of the fact that these people, and in all honesty, I don't think necessarily that they weren't evil, because if you read the book, I say this probably every stupid podcast. If you read the book that Michael made me read that ruined my whole life,
Yeah, I'll put it up on the screen. I'll put it up on the screen.
if you read that book, so many things fit into all of your brain just starts going, and you're like, oh my gosh, I see this now, and I see this now, and I see this now, because what actually so many of these people, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, all of these people were into some form of I don't want to say devil worship. What is it? It's the that we have on our money.
Like the Illuminati, the secret
Thank you.
societies.
The
Yeah.
all-seeing eye.
They were all into that's
the killing of Uncle Sam. I mean, this is just the epitome of it's so unbelievable. But yeah, Jenny, I'm glad that I could ruin your life with that book in some way.
You did. I mean, honestly, it was that one book. I swear, guys, you've got to read this book. Those of you who are on here, if you haven't read this book yet, please read the book and pass it on. And yes, they were culty.
Yeah.
But read that book and pass it on, because yes, it did ruin my life in a way, but it made so many things fit into slots that made my mind kind of grasp this whole thing. And let me say this, because I think we don't put this together often enough. Human beings are imprinted by God. This is my belief. I mean, we all come from God, who has a pattern, and we're all completely individual, but we have some very similar traits that just and they're all talked about in the Bible: greed, avarice, the fact that our heart is deceitful, that we don't use that instead of our head. I mean, there are so many human. Oh, and Lisa said, yeah, Masons. That's what it was. Thank you. You're exactly right. Oh, yes, I have that. If we want to do a book group and a study guide, we need the study guide, Michael.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe we should do that on the side, Sandy. After this, we'll talk about it. And maybe we could do a podcast where we actually go through the whole book. I think it would be so advantageous for everybody who reads it. But back to what I was trying to say here was, if part of the reasons that we are human beings are all the reasons why we need Jesus in the first place, right? I mean, greed, we all have this desire to have more than we need to have. That's what, I mean, we just have it. It causes greed. Greed can cause jealousy. Jealousy can cause murder. I mean, if you drag it down, we're not good people. And that's, I think, what separates us conservatives. I honestly think that one linchpin is what separates conservatives from liberals, because liberals believe, like Julianne, we were talking about earlier about hope. They believe that people can aspire on their own to be better. They believe that people are inherently good. But those of us who are conservatives realize that we are not inherently good. I mean, we're simply not. The whole reason we have Jesus is to try to be the best people that we can on the planet, because all of the bad things that we like to do are the things that create the downfall of not just us individually, but society as a whole. And avarice is probably one, and greed are probably the biggest reasons why we've seen society go into the toilet in the last several years, probably since the Industrial Revolution, because people woke up and went, you mean I don't have to go out during the day and catch the chicken and kill the chicken and take the chicken apart and put the chicken in the pot and do, I mean, it's so easy to want to not have to do things, right? We're going to take the cheapest, easiest way out every single time. And these people who are in power know this, and they feed that, and we eat it and think we're doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say, the progressives at the top, the sort of engineers of the progressive agenda, they probably don't believe that human improvement is possible, just as a real possibility for the individual. But they do think that systems can be engineered in order to remedy those problems on a practical level for themselves. So I think if you look back, say, to the Federalist Papers, and you see that James Madison, for example, writes, well, if human beings were angels, then no government would be necessary, right? Mm-hmm. But we have to have institutions to check some of these avaricious tendencies that we have. And the best thing to do is to sort of unite self-interest with an office or an institution, and then pit that, like, one self-interest and institution against another, so that no one can become too powerful, right? So you have a messy system, but it keeps itself from consolidating into one just one large monopoly of avarice and greed and tyranny,
a giant blob that eats everything.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas the progressives think, it's not about using friction to diminish the harm done, but rather it's about seamless integration at the highest level to create the greatest efficiency in what the engineers of the progressive mentality want done.
Yeah.
So you design a holistic system that doesn't give people the opportunity to discover and pursue their own interests at all. Instead, you create a hive mind where you have no individuals, but you have a very smooth, frictionless, seamless, totally aligned community of, I don't know, of happiness, hope, trust, empathy, kindness, whatever you want.
All the things that make humans comfortable and feel good.
Yes, and you do that instead of it's a materialist account. So instead of looking to Christ as the I hate to it sounds irreverent to say the solution, like, so I don't want to say it like that. But instead of looking to Christ for salvation and a remedy for the sin that we carry with us, instead you look to, and that's a wholly transcendent perspective. You have to look beyond this world totally. Then the progressives and even most conservatives today who are just looking at politics and even if it goes back to the founding, that's still a sort of materialist account where you think that what human beings make and what they devise, institutions, systems, processes, like that, those are the remedy, right?
Yeah.
They're not talking about sin and a soul needing to be regenerated through Christ's love. Rather, they're saying, what can they're ignoring sin and they're saying, what can we build that can solve everything? And the conservatives are a little better because I think that they still preserve that idea of a fallen human nature. So in that sense, I do think that's closer to the reality. Whereas the progressives think, oh, we have the infinite capacity to build systems that for our own improvement. But again, there's a lie involved because you have certain people who are building the system and others who just become a cog in it.
Yeah.
Well, somebody said
that's where. Well, before you throw that up, Jenny, but the small caveat to that also, Julianne, is that's where you have all that materialism, all that self-worship, all that everything. You get into those echo chambers in your own culture. So, what you may define as hope or something like that, Julianne, is completely different from one of these crazy people. I say crazy people, but ultimately, I mean, one of these very selfish, self-centered, materialistic people that
not crazy, selfish, because if you say crazy, then that takes the onus off of them to be better.
Yeah,
they're just selfish.
But their interpretation of the outside world is what they base, their entire life on, rather than what's actually in the world and what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
the grounds for the distraction. Why could people, why did people not look into this Carnegie report? Why did people not look into the records that were plainly stating the fact that the philanthropists were going to, take over the government? It's because they were already distracted with this, this materialist worldview where instead of, focusing ourselves on the eternal and what's really meaningful, you are so wrapped up in the mundane world that, you're chasing this here, you're driving there, you're doing whatever, and you're not thinking about what's really important.
Well, and what Sandy says is so important because this is so, I mean, this is 100%.
That's exactly it.
I mean, we need to put this on a billboard someplace because she's 100% right over the target. That's exactly why. What's the matter with Sal? You guys are just mean. And you're like, you can't, I mean, this is an awful thing to say, but I mean, it's true. You can't fix stupid. I mean, people who just literally will not listen to anything because they're convinced that they're right, are, you could argue, stupid. I mean, because people who are wise, if you want to consider stupid the 180 of wise people listen and say, let me think about that a minute and I'll get back to you. Right? I mean, that's a
They have
wise.
discernment. They have discernment.
Right. Right. And like this is, and so she's back again, Dr. Harrell. They don't have ears to hear or eyes to see. And that's true, which causes cognitive dissonance. I mean, oh, and Lisa says, I spent most of my adult life in the company of folks who believe we are all good. We are all goddesses. It's an insidious lie and never made any of us feel better or more powerful. And it goes back to the self-help thing. And it's so weird that we started this conversation about education and really we're educating ourselves as we're going on, because I do believe that the root of all of the things that we're seeing right now is in what we're talking about right now, what all of these people in the comment sections are actually getting and putting together. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom here. I mean, this is torn. Torn, you're the best. You're the best. I mean, who could argue with that? I can't argue with that. Oh my goodness. I mean, honestly, I think, but I guess the bottom line here is this. And I don't know, Julianne, you've been an educator. I've been an educator. Michael's just a problem solver. That's who he is. He solves problems. So why between the three of us can we not figure out how to make people understand this?
Because that's not how education works. You know, we have to be the messengers and the vehicles, and ultimately they've got to figure it out, you know? So I think
that's harsh.
Yeah. I mean, but what are we called to do? We're called to try our best to put the information out there, to have the conversations. And, you know, as I think about, you know, the sorry state of formal schooling, I've got 4 kids, and I think, well, I've flopped as a homeschooler. That was a big disaster. And then, you know, we've tried to find a good parochial school, a classical school, and, you know, that is its own mess. I mean, and when I look at things, and I always come back to, well, there's really no good alternative right now. So what is it that I as a parent have to teach my kids? Well, it's that you yourself know that no one's going to give anything to you. If you want it, you have to go get it yourself, you know? And so I tell them, I would love to come up with a syllabus where you read through Thucydides, you know, over the course of the semester. And you learn this stuff, and you learn a deep appreciation for history and the Greeks. This is on my mind because it's on my dining room table right now. We were looking at the Trojan War and Greek society. And I think I would love to give you this, but where we are as a family, where society is, I can point you to the good stuff, but ultimately it's going to be you that takes responsibility for learning it. And I think we have to be the ones to carry that message and just keep saying that, because until someone decides, I want to figure this out, I want to know, I want to think for myself, then they're just not going to. But we have to keep alive that alternative. You know, we have to, because people are going to, that's going to be erased from memory. The fact that there is something that the individual can do for himself or herself. So our job even though it's unsatisfying, we want to see some results. We want to see people go with their big bag of human manure and go to the Capitol and say, take this with your SEL, right? And then we want to see the legislators go, we're never going to do that again. You guys are right. We never, that the whole thing really was a case of just make shit up, right? we want to have that wonderful object lesson for them, don't we? I'm so sorry.
Hey, we need another tag.
Andy says I have an appointment Monday.
Yeah. We need another tag that says drop shit off. We got make shit up. We got drop shit off. That's what we need.
I know, right?
Drop shit off Monday. Here we go. Drop
you
shit
guys,
off
I hope
Tuesday.
there's nobody at home with kids. Monday. Quit saying the S word.
Hey, I did want to make a comment though when Julianne, you were talking about, you know, people taking responsibility, and part of that question, Jenny, that you asked with that is a perfect example of that is like what Julia said with cognitive dissonance. So like when I was knocking doors for the school board and I'd actually show someone, you know, one of the books that were in the school, they couldn't even put it together that kind of material is in the school, because if they did, they would have to take responsibility that it happened under their watch while they're a parent or while they're a grandparent or while they're a taxpayer in the system. This stuff happened. So, I mean, that's just another part of that equation. You know, people don't really want to take responsibility for this stuff that's happened and that is happening.
Yeah. Your wife sent me and I still have to do a story on this. I'm hoping I've got time maybe this weekend. I don't know. But she sent me a post that you guys had found on social media where, you know, Dusty Devers had this bill to try to move some of the, these endless, what am I trying to say? Like, fixes for disabilities. I think a lot of them were, you know, disabilities, and he was trying to actually move them out to a different place instead of having them right in schools. And people didn't read the bill, and they started having these horrendous meltdowns about how dare you take away X from me. And it I think was probably so instructive if people could actually see that, to understand how much we've been conditioned to want. And being conditioned to want and having these wants is what drives all of the bad things. It's when you figure out how to do what you have within your own resources that people can't control you. People can't put you in a box and try to turn you off or on or do whatever it is that they're trying to do. And like you said, Michael, people don't want to have that responsibility and take that for themselves and say, you know, hey, I'm going to work on this myself. This is my child. This is our family. We're going to work on this ourselves and figure out how this works. They don't want to do that. They just want to say, throw up their hands and push the easy button and go, government, do it. Government, do it. Someone else do it. Someone else do it. And that's what they want. And then some of them will even have the cognitive dissonance and have to go, well, I don't understand why they want me to do this. Why are they making me do this? And you just want to go. Robert says, did you all read Seyfried's Cradle to Grave AI Learning Database Bill for Public Education?
No, I have not read that.
8-1. No, we'll need to look that one up. Thank you for that, Robert. Holy cow. Sandy says their pride would not allow them to realize. In the words of Randy Travis, they've been gone for too long. It's too late to come back now. Yeah, you came a long way going the wrong way. And I think that is so much of it. And there are some comments I wanted to get back to. Government's worked hard at there we go. There we go. Government has worked hard at taking the place of family. Remember Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village. And I think that is a huge huge O, and her bill SB 215 passed 10 to 0. But here's the other thing that you're reminding me about. In those committees, those people rubber stamp everything. Think about how they get to a committee. They're put there because the leadership wants them. Because the leadership wants them. Nobody's going to argue over do pass. Okay, well, it looks like, okay, we passed it. I mean, the whole system is rigged against us if we don't just go there and sit. And Lisa says, and once they've had something handed to them, good luck taking it away. Suddenly it's, how dare you steal this from me? And that's, I think, the biggest thing. And apparently Linda Murphy has an article about cradle to grave. I'm sure she does. There were some comments I wanted to get back to here. Amy.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, think of all the people that like send you a text, and then if you don't respond within like 10 seconds, they're already like sending you question marks. Or, well, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Here's one I wanted to get back to. Yeah. Jenny, you can do this by calmly asking them to defend their position. That's what woke me up. I couldn't. I realized I was just parroting. And that's so many people after COVID. That is what woke them up. And I agree. And so everybody who's on here, our lovely audience today, stop and think about what Lisa is saying. So next time somebody says, well, I just need to have this money because we don't, and then blah, 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 just say, okay, well, explain to me why. I mean, just tell me why that's true. And you'll find out, because I do this on social media frequently when I have time. I just nail people by going, okay, so tell me how that works, or explain that to me. And then they just do. They end up parroting talking points. And the ones I think who have the ears to hear and the eyes to see open their minds and go, oh, oops, what did I just say out loud? And I heard myself say that or type that. So I think that is a huge thing. And Julia reminded us about Philippians 4, which I think we have to read because or Philippians 4, because I think that's so important. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure. We forget to think about those things. And then Lisa said it all goes back to the original lie, Satan tempting us to be more godlike, to have hidden knowledge that makes us more powerful than the other guy. And I do think there's so much of that to be true, but it's like, and then Stephanie said cognitive dissonance is one way slavery held its grip for so long in our nation. That is a fact. That's a fact. It's possible because of it. We may someday be back at a different form of slavery. I would agree that I would say that we actually already are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Julie, of course, agrees with that.
Ding,
but
ding.
yeah, and I think that every time we say, well, I can't do this, or I have to go get my car tag, or I have to go get my driver's license, or I have to pay this fee. We don't understand that that's us being in some form of slavery, because that's us having to go to the government, kiss its ring, genuflect, bow, yeah. I don't know. So anyway, so what do we do outside of what Lisa said, which is, I think, what every one of us has to adopt right now is this willingness to take on people and say, okay, explain that to me. How does that work?
I mean, I think this is going to sound unsatisfying, but I think probably becoming comfortable with a lack of satisfaction is really crucial, in itself. But I think we just have to keep having the conversation, and so we have to approach the masses as if each member of the masses were a person who could learn, who could take on responsibility, you know? So that's your hope, I think, Jenny. And I know, like, almost everyone that I've met and gotten to know who is a genuine educator, like, we always have that hope in the potential of the individual, you know? And so we can talk our grumpy, despairing talk, but deep down, you know, we're only like that because we have such intense hope for each person that we encounter. And so what we have to do is keep having the conversation so that when that individual that we might not be able to identify, it might be the most surprising person out there, like uh, they can have an experience with a different point of view, and that could be the occasion for them saying, I wonder. And, you know, like Aristotle says, all men by nature desire to know. You know, we all wonder. And that's the beginning of good things, I think. So we cannot uh, we have to hold ourselves back, like restrain ourselves from wanting a systematic fix, because we're just not going to get one. And as educators, we do know that, but you know, we still experience that push and pull, like the tug. We want to make things better, like um but I think, yeah, we just keep doing this and let the seeds fall, and surely there will be some fertile ground. And we leave that up to God.
I 100%. And just kind of to cinch up what you were saying and what Lisa was saying, definitely you guys are on the same page. So I wrote about the problems we've been having on the farm the last holy couple of weeks. Had just been, I mean, a horror show over here. We just have had a kind of a tough time about it and with it. And I was talking to a friend, and she said, you know, I was reading your thing and I was so sad. And I live in the city and I have this little bitty dog, but I didn't think about all these other things. And, when I think about that, I think, golly, you really do have a completely different life than me. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think that's why, and I've said this several times in many different ways, your testimony, nobody can take that away from you. I talk about my testimony. I give it whenever people ask, because it's a Paul, like, fall off the horse with a bright light kind of a testimony. I've got it. It's mine. You can argue with me about it, but it's not going to do any good because I'm the authority on that topic. It happened to me, and you can't argue. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's just not going to happen because you couldn't know anything about it. There's no way for you to wedge in an argument there. And I think when we tell our individual stories, like Lisa just a second ago, who said, until somebody forced me to explain that, I hadn't even really thought about it. I think when we tell our individual stories and we talk about things that happen to us personally, and I know none of us here are big, let's vomit up stuff on social media. But I will say the one good thing about social media is those messages carry. And there are people who are reading what we write. Yeah. And they may not write back and go, oh, Julianne, you're the best thing ever since sliced bread changed my whole outlook or way of life. I mean, we may never hear that. But like Julia and Lisa and so many people who are on here this morning are talking, it's the seeds. And so I guess that's why I have hope, Julianne, because I do believe, our hope is in the Lord. I'm not going to say anything different than that, but he's made us his hands and feet here. Mm-hmm. And we have to be able to use them, in the directions that we know he wants us to go. And I think a lot of the ways that you do that is by telling your individual story. And that's super, super important. And I think that's what we all need to take this week to think about coming up, is how we're going to tell our individual stories to make a difference to the people who are out there who are watching what we have to say. Just a thought. Seed planting doesn't
I think
apply to
that's
government.
great. I think that is
however,
right on.
issues regarding our health, safety, or freedoms need to be met head on with equal force, not seed planting. Now that's true. That's true. Oh, stop.
Yeah, Sandy's
Sandy.
comment there. That is why it's so important, I think, for adults to talk about those things, because, our kids, they need to learn how to do that themselves. My seeds are disrespectful. That
well, and
is
another
awesome.
point on all those kids, Julianne, is they need to learn how to fail. I mean, it's okay to fail. I mean, that's how you really learn anything in life, is when and they're not really allowed to do that, in one way or another, just because that's how school is. Everybody's a winner. Everybody's good. Everybody this, everybody that, it's like a collective good. And that's not, you need major competition. I mean, I remember in the 4th grade, Mrs. Hammond's class, she literally would put 2 of us up at the blackboard and she'd just give us 2 numbers, multiply, divide, whatever, whoever the winner was stayed. And that was the main thing, was we wanted to stay up on that board and beat everybody else. And that my teacher did that. Instilled that competition in me back in the 4th grade.
But we can't see, that's how you know that progressivism in education is bad. Well, you can't do that because you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. Yeah. Well, you know what? Yeah. Hurt feelings are not a bad thing. When did we get the idea that, I want to protect myself from hurt feelings? When did we get that?
Yeah.
Somebody should have stood up a long time ago and gone, okay, well, so your feelings are hurt. Get over it. Do what? What did you say, Julianne?
You need to be more resilient.
Yeah.
Well, but that's what the government wants. The government wants victims, because the victims create dependency. I mean, that's what it is. If your feelings are hurt, you're a victim, because you're in control of your feelings. No matter what I say or do to you, I can't affect you unless you let it affect you. I mean, I preach that to my kids all the time, but that's what the government wants. That's how these huge corporations, they want victims. They want just people that are victims, because we're controllable at that point.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to everything. Just like, I kept wanting, I say second, but yep. But one thing that Michael mentioned at the very beginning that I just wanted to come back to is when he said, I was talking about the impact investing and this new economy. And he said, well, meanwhile, the real economy, making things, producing things, that's all broken. And the numbers are fudged so that we don't realize how broken it is. That is really crucial, I think, because that pattern to break things while people don't realize how broken they are, so that you have to fix them. You have a crisis that has to be, there's a reaction and then a solution. That is the model across the board. So you have it in the economy. We've got this, we are told that, there's this growing opportunity in impact investment, corporate social responsibility, government efficiency, which is a big lie, because that would be another podcast. But, we have all of these things, the narrative that is spun that just makes shit up. And meanwhile, the real thing is tanking. And it's just like what you mentioned, Jenny, about the medical school. Like, there's a huge facade that's transmitted, and we don't exactly know how. There's not a narrative that says, go in and ruin everything so that we can come back and build it back better. But people have to start to recognize that the breakage is profitable for some people who want to control the system. So the dependency, creating the dependency, is very profitable. And so I guess maybe this is my last thing, because I know we've been, preaching to the choir for a long time here, but
I don't know that
You
it's
know,
all
you
the
look at what they
choir.
want, you look at what the agenda wants, and then you try to do the opposite. So if they say, "Oh, you need this. Oh, this is good," then you just sort of look at, you try to imagine the alternative and then pursue it. So if they say, "Ooh, state governments are inefficient and they're getting in the way of democracy, really, and we need to get rid of them," then you say, "Oh, those things are probably pretty good. We probably need those." And there you go. You get some practice, like bucking up. You get some practice critical thinking, and you just sort of look at everything in its opposite way.
Well, I want to go off in that vein for just a second, Julianne, because I want to remind everybody, there's been a massive consolidation in the United States over the last, I'd say probably 20 years have been really accelerated. But
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, every little town had multiple stores,
Yeah.
multiple businesses, independently owned newspapers, independently owned little businesses, mom and pop shops. All of that has been consolidated in the last 50 years down to, a handful of companies on
Yeah.
purpose. And that's just part of that whole thing. You go into all these towns that are literally just broken, and you have one employer, one or two big employers,
Walmart.
and that's it. I mean, that's part
Yeah.
of that whole process of, like within like the Hegelian dialectic, where you've got problem, reaction, solution, like you were kind of talking about, where you've got these major investment, conglomerated multinational businesses. They go in, they buy up everything. Now they're just in control, and you're basically completely disempowered, because now you can't compete with Walmart in your little town. You can't,
Yeah.
you can't do all your own stuff. You can't even grow your own food. You can't even save your own seeds, all that stuff in one. And it's just a downhill, power. It's just a transfer of power from the people to these multinational, major government cooperated, conglomerations.
And it
Yeah. And
works
who
because
put that? The chambers of commerce.
Yeah.
The chambers of commerce.
Yeah, there we go.
Like, they sold it to the people. So that's
Yeah.
why we should be very suspicious of chamber of commerce and government education partnerships,
But it
because
works
they did
because
that.
we're too lazy to do anything else.
Well,
It's so
I'll
much
say,
easier if I just go to Walmart because I can get everything there.
yeah, I won't say lazy, Jenny. I would say they've provided a level of convenience now. It's so convenient just to follow that model, to go along, watch your videos, see your social media. You want to go eat, you can go eat in 5 minutes, wherever you want to go. You can go buy whatever it is you want to buy or do. You don't have to take the time to cultivate something, to grow something, to build something. It's that convenience factor now that we're all just put into.
Well, but I guess I say lazy because I want people to understand that we're being lazy about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we really are being lazy. I try very hard not to buy things off of Amazon. If I can't find them someplace directly or around me, and I have no choice, and it's something that I need to have, particularly for the farm, that can be kind of tricky. Then I do, but I try desperately not to use the big things if I can get away with it. But again, when they push you into the model, it's really hard to break the model. We just don't have that much power as individuals. And when you have the state giving $1 billion, $1 trillion company like Paycom millions and millions of our own tax dollars to help them be better, how are you able to get the little mom and pop stores to compete? Well, but the answer is Governor Stitt, for example. He doesn't want those little people competing. He wants to give the money to the people who are going to be able to provide jobs, who are providing, or if they're new, like electric, green energy. We love to provide, millions of dollars for that kind of stuff that doesn't work. So I don't know, but we're going to have to get off of here because it's 1:48, and there were some really good comments that I wanted to get through before we get out of here. Dorn says, and the removal of that convenience will be much more dramatic when it hits. The Mennonites will prevail. And that's, he's funny because that's Storm, but that's 100% spot on. 100%. Gracie says, my town once had jewelry stores, shoe stores. Walmart moved in, and one by one, all those shops closed. Our main street is basically dead now. Then came Dollar Store, then Dollar Tree. Very hard to compete with cheap prices, even though they're cheaper quality. And that's 100% there. Let me go back to a couple of comments that we had, which were really good. We need to bring back competition and a little righteous shame.
I'll take down a toddler in Candyland.
I told you, how many times have I told you guys, I want a t-shirt that says bring back shame.
Yeah. Shame has got some motivation to it. You get shamed, you will take some action if you get shamed.
Man, I'll tell you, that happened to me a lot when I was a kid. I got shamed quite a bit, and I'm telling you that I think probably helped develop me into the person that I am now. Mavis made a comment, so many logical fallacies are applied to societal issues. Gosh, that's true. Too many ideas are being allowed to matriculate into problem solvers. It's gross. I wish I could walk through in public school the R.C. Sproul book, The Consequences of Ideas. Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole show on that, and maybe we do want to do that. Lisa says, of course, Julianne, and this was an excellent comment. When someone breaks you in an area, they're the ones who know exactly how to fix you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Julia says, just like textbook companies, when you were talking about the homogenization of everything, just like textbook companies, we once had a lot of choices and now we don't. And consolidation is happening in the trades and family-owned companies too. It's very true. We had so many good comments. When you do something wrong, you should feel shame. Otherwise, you're a sociopath. But see, this is the problem, guys. People don't get that. We have to protect ourselves from shame.
Yeah. Well, if you're so self-centered, you don't think you're doing anything wrong in the first place.
Well, and think about, and Mavis made a comment earlier on about we don't understand what mental illness is. And so I'm going to put these together. And of course, this will be something that I'm probably doxxed for, or I don't know, who knows what's going to happen to me after I say this. But it's kind of the same way as the whole lie that a man in a dress and high heels is somehow a woman. We don't actually help these people by shaming them and saying, you know what, guys don't wear dresses. We don't do that. And certainly, that's not what's good for the public, because you think about this. I saw a video. Oh, your wife sent it to me this morning, Michael, a little Instagram video from a guy who was basically talking about kind of that similar thing, is that we don't, I think it was, we don't shame people into like, for example, he was complaining about the library books. Some woman was talking about this horrible library book, and he's like, dude, I'm gay. Okay. This is bad. We don't do this to children. This is wrong. We don't do it. So what you do in your own adult house, in your own adult life, is one thing, but we don't parade around like women in front of children if we're men, or we don't do that stuff because it doesn't help society. And if you want to argue with me, and if you want to say, well, you're a bigot or a whatever it is, because they love to call names because that's supposed to shut you down, which, by the way, if you haven't noticed, it doesn't work on me. So if they say that, well, you can't say this, and they try to shut you down. But the problem is if you look at society the way it is now, there's no way to argue my point, because if we weren't doing this as a society, like we didn't do that during, I don't know, I guess even the 60s, probably. Well, certainly the 80s and the 90s, because that wasn't this big thing. I don't know. I'm probably getting. It sounds like we need to get Michael's wife on here too.
Yeah. I've told her. She's like, I'm not coming on there.
Lauren wouldn't do it, Gracie, but you're right. We do. All right. Well, let's close this out here as we wind up on almost 2 hours. Well, and this is important. Hold on. Shame and competition need to be used properly with love. You can't shame one into loving behavior or true change, but allowing shameful behavior is wrong. So I completely agree with that. You can't change anybody's opinions by, like that group. I don't know what they're called, and I don't want to know what they're called because I don't want to give them any time here. But there's a group that goes out and they have signs that say "fag, you're going to hell" and stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me one person that has suddenly gone, "Oh my God, I'm a fag, I'm going to hell." How does that work? That doesn't work. That's not helpful to anybody. If you have, what is it? What's the Bible verse? Somebody help me with this. If you have not love, you are just a clanging cymbal. Julie will remember that. And that's absolutely true. We have, it was the Westboro Baptist, but it's not them. It's another street preaching group that does that. But you have to have love to be able to sink into people. You can't attack people and then go, "Well, he didn't listen to me." So I don't know. You have to. Modeling behavior is more effective, as Amy said, and I would agree with that. All right. Anything to close this out, Julianne?
Nope. We're going to have to come up with a real zinger for next time to beat this show.
Some new hashtags. We need some new
hashtags. I know. Wasn't that funny? We're going to have to just make some shit up.
I do want to show something real quick, since I do have, arrest Gates here. When you kind of look at that globalist, and we could go back in time, and look at, because you kind of hit on a little bit, Julianne, when we were talking about all those industrialists and how they think, they genetically, they thought they were superior. That just goes back through the hierarchy of all the kings and their bloodlines and all that stuff. But you look at a guy, so instead of Bill Gates, I want to just show something on Bill Gates' dad. Do you know very much about Bill Gates' father? Bill Gates.
I mean, he was Planned Parenthood, right?
Yeah. So you got Bill Gates Sr., who, now the Gates Foundation, which is now what it's called, but his dad started that, and literally it was the Institute for Population and Reproductive Health. I mean, that in itself, and they changed the name of that not too long. It didn't go like that for too long, because they're like, hey, this is all population control, but that's the basis of that. But when you look at how these people are tied globally, this is what I want to show about his father. So he's a lawyer, a civic leader. He served on the board of Planned Parenthood, like you said, but also he was in the Chamber of Commerce. He was in, United Way. And that's just a couple of these little deals. But that's how tied in all these different organizations are. They're tied in for a common purpose of control in one way or another. And it's people like that just have this, epiphany or whatever, and they've got the means to do it, and they just do it. They literally just do it. They just follow along and do it.
Yeah.
Ay. Amy said, we'll close it out with this. Thanks for making my virtual school day Grubhub delivery side gig more exciting today. Well, I thank you, everybody who watches, and we've had a real solid audience today. And I do love the fact that you guys continually think and challenge our thinking and put in your comments. And Julia did find the 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. So that goes in with what Lisa said. We do have to make sure that what we're saying with love, and we can be snarky and, all of that kind of stuff on a podcast. But when we're dealing with people individually, there's nothing that's going to work more than showing them the love of Jesus. There just isn't. People don't have the heart to hear, I think, without that. That's why Jesus is Lord. That's why he's King. So, all right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Julianne, for being on with us today.
Yeah.
We'll have to, before you leave, we'll work on getting you back on next month and trying to find that perfect thing that will outdo the one that we had today. So we'll do that. Everybody have a great weekend. Guess what's going to happen this weekend? It's going to be above 6.
There we go.
Is nobody excited about that? I, for one, am so sick of the freezing cold temperatures. It's actually supposed to be 60 this weekend. I'm going to be sitting outside on my deck like a lizard.
Sounds good to me.
All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. We love to have you with us, and we'll see you again next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Thanks again.